Hiroo Onoda, a young lieutenant in the Imperial Japanese Army, stepped onto the small Philippine island of Lubang in December 1944 with a mission that would define the rest of his life. World War II was collapsing around Japan, but Onoda had been given explicit orders: sabotage the airfield and pier, destroy any enemy aircraft or troops attempting to land, and under no circumstances surrender or take his own life. These instructions, delivered by his commanding officer Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, were absolute. As Allied forces closed in, most Japanese troops on Lubang were killed or captured within weeks. But Onoda and 3 remaining soldiers vanished into the dense jungle, determined to fight on. For nearly 3 decades, he lived as a ghost of a war that had ended, emerging only on March 9, 1974, after a chance encounter with a Japanese explorer and the formal release from duty by his long-retired commander. Onoda became the penultimate Japanese soldier to officially surrender, a man who survived 29 years in hiding through skill, discipline, and an unshakable belief that Japan was still at war. Born on March 19, 1922, in the quiet town of Kainan in Wakayama Prefecture, central Japan, Hiroo Onoda grew up in a traditional family that valued discipline and honor. At age 18, in 1940, he left his job at a trading company in China to enlist in the Imperial Japanese Army. His sharp mind and physical resilience quickly marked him for something beyond ordinary infantry service. Selected for elite training, he was sent to the Futamata branch of the prestigious Nakano School in Tokyo, an institution dedicated to producing intelligence operatives and guerrilla commanders. The curriculum was brutal and multifaceted. Onoda learned sabotage techniques, hand-to-hand combat, cryptography, map reading, and survival in hostile environments. He studied propaganda, both how to spread it and how to detect it. Instructors drilled into him the art of operating behind enemy lines for months or years without support. But more than tactics, the Nakano School instilled a psychological fortress. Loyalty to the emperor was not negotiable. Obedience was sacred. Unlike the standard battlefield code, the Senjinkan, which demanded death before capture and encouraged ritual suicide in defeat, Onoda's training emphasized long-term resistance. "Your mission may outlast the war itself," one instructor told him. "You must survive to fight another day." This doctrine would become both his strength and his prison. Promoted to second lieutenant by late 1944, Onoda received his final assignment: Lubang Island, a rugged speck of land about 150 kilometers southwest of Manila. His orders were precise: destroy the airfield and harbor facilities to prevent Allied use during the anticipated invasion of early 1945. He arrived with a small team, but almost immediately ran into conflict with senior officers already on the island. The airfield and pier, they argued, were needed to evacuate Japanese wounded and personnel. Onoda was overruled. Instead of demolition, he was tasked with fortifying defenses and preparing for withdrawal. The failure to complete his primary objective haunted him. "I had been sent to destroy," he later wrote, "but was forced to preserve." On February 28, 1945, American troops landed on Lubang's northern coast. The assault was swift and overwhelming. Within days, organized Japanese resistance collapsed. Bodies littered the beaches. Survivors scattered into the hills. Major Taniguchi gathered Onoda and his 3 remaining men, Privates Yuichi Akatsu, Shoichi Shimada, and Kinshichi Kozuka, for final instructions. "Hold out," he said. "Supplies may be cut off for years. Whatever happens, do not surrender. Do not die by your own hand. I will return for you." Then he was gone, evacuated with the last transport. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. The formal ceremony aboard the USS Missouri took place on September 2. News reached even remote islands through leaflets dropped by American planes. One fluttered into Onoda's camp in October 1945. It announced the war's end in Japanese. The men read it in silence. Onoda examined the paper, the ink, the phrasing. "Propaganda," he declared. "The Americans are trying to flush us out." When another leaflet appeared, this one bearing General Tomoyuki Yamashita's surrender order, Onoda dissected it with the same skepticism. Yamashita had been captured months earlier. How could he issue orders? The signature looked wrong. The grammar was off. It had to be a forgery. His training had prepared him for this exact deception. Convinced the war continued, Onoda and his men began a guerrilla campaign. They raided farms for rice, stole livestock, and ambushed patrols. To them, every Filipino was a potential collaborator or conscript. Civilians who resisted were enemy agents. Police were American puppets. Search parties were traps. They moved only at night, slept in caves, and memorized the island's terrain. Their diet was whatever the jungle offered: green bananas, coconut flesh, wild yams, occasional dried fish stolen from drying racks. They repaired their uniforms with bark cloth and needle and thread scavenged from abandoned homes. Rain soaked them for months at a time. Malaria came and went. But they endured. Doubt, however, began to erode the group. In 1949, Yuichi Akatsu slipped away during a rainstorm. 6 months later, he surrendered to Filipino authorities. Onoda was furious. "Deserter," he muttered. In 1952, Japanese search teams dropped bundles into the jungle, letters from families, photographs, newspapers announcing Japan's post-war recovery. Onoda studied each item under candlelight. The photos could be staged. The letters might be written under duress. The newspapers were full of American influence. He burned them all. The jungle took its toll. In 1953, during a nighttime raid on a village granary, Shoichi Shimada was shot in the leg by police. Infection set in. Without medicine, he suffered for weeks before dying in agony. A year later, in 1954, another search party cornered the remaining 3 men near a river. Bullets tore through the undergrowth. Shimada was killed instantly. Now only Onoda and Kinshichi Kozuka remained. For the next 18 years, the 2 men lived as shadows. They built hidden camps high in the mountains, moving every few months to avoid detection. They kept meticulous logs of enemy movements, police patrols, construction projects, aircraft sightings. They repaired their rifles with handmade tools, reloaded ammunition using powder scraped from dud shells, and maintained a strict military routine: reveille at dawn, calisthenics, intelligence briefings, night watches. They spoke little. Trust had eroded into ritual. Over the decades, they killed approximately 30 civilians and wounded over 100 more in raids and firefights. To Onoda, every casualty was a combatant. Every burned hut was a strategic target. The people of Lubang lived in fear of the mountain ghost, a soldier who struck without warning and vanished into the trees. Children were warned never to wander alone. Farmers carried guns to their fields. In his memoir No Surrender, My 30-Year War, published in 1974, Onoda reflected on how deeply he and Kozuka had internalized their reality. By 1959, he wrote, "We had been at war for so long that peace was unimaginable. Any evidence to the contrary was automatically suspect." He admitted that even when jets roared overhead during the Korean War, he interpreted them as Japanese reinforcements. When transistor radios crackled with news of Tokyo's skyscrapers and bullet trains, he dismissed them as psychological operations. His mind had become a closed system. On October 19, 1972, everything changed. During a raid on a rice cache, Kozuka was shot and killed by police. Onoda buried his last comrade under a cairn of stones and continued alone. For the next 18 months, he lived in total isolation, speaking only to the wind and the ghosts of his men. He patched his uniform with banana leaves, sharpened his bayonet on river rocks, and waited for orders that would never come. Japan had declared the Lubang holdouts dead in 1959. But Kozuka's body, recovered with a still functional rifle and Japanese ammunition, reignited hope. By 1974, Onoda's story had become legend. Enter Norio Suzuki, a 24-year-old college dropout and adventurer who told friends he wanted to find 3 things before he died: a panda, a yeti, and Lieutenant Onoda. In February 1974, he landed on Lubang with a backpack, a camera, and no plan. Astonishingly, he found Onoda within 4 days. The meeting was surreal. Suzuki emerged from the jungle calling out in Japanese. Onoda leveled his rifle, then lowered it when he saw the young man's face. They talked for hours. Suzuki explained that the war had ended in 1945, that Japan was now a peaceful economic power, that the emperor had urged all soldiers to lay down arms. Onoda listened, unmoved. "I have orders," he said. "I cannot surrender without relief from my commanding officer." Suzuki took photos, promised to return, and left. Back in Japan, Suzuki's evidence caused a sensation. The government located Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, now a retired bookseller in Tottori Prefecture. On March 9, 1974, Taniguchi, Suzuki, and a small delegation flew to Lubang. They found Onoda waiting at a prearranged clearing, still in his tattered imperial uniform, rifle slung, sword at his side. Taniguchi read from a prepared statement. "By order of His Imperial Majesty, all combat activities are to cease. Lieutenant Onoda, you are hereby relieved of duty." Onoda stood at attention. Tears rolled down his weathered cheeks. He unbuckled his sword, given to him by his mother with instructions to use it on himself if captured, and handed it over. Then the rifle, 500 rounds of live ammunition, several hand grenades, and a dagger. The war, for him, was finally over. At age 52, Onoda returned to a Japan he barely recognized. 8,000 people greeted him at Haneda Airport. NHK broadcast his arrival live. He bowed deeply, still ramrod straight, his boots polished with jungle wax. He presented his sword to Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, who granted a full pardon for all deaths on Lubang. His family, parents long dead, siblings aged beyond recognition, embraced a brother they had mourned for 30 years. Japan's conservatives hailed him as a living samurai, a symbol of loyalty and perseverance in an era of materialism. His memoir became an instant bestseller, though some veterans and his ghostwriter later questioned embellishments. But modern life grated on Onoda. He was appalled by youth culture, short skirts, and the diminished status of the emperor. In April 1975, he followed his brother Tadao to a Japanese farming colony in São Paulo, Brazil. There, he bought a cattle ranch, learned Portuguese, and found solace in wide horizons and hard work. He married a Japanese-Brazilian woman in 1976 and split his time between continents. In 1980, news of a Tokyo teenager who murdered his parents shocked Onoda. "Japanese youth have lost their way," he said. In 1984, he founded Onoda Shizenjuku, nature schools across Japan teaching survival skills, discipline, and respect for tradition. Thousands of children passed through his camps, learning to build fires, navigate by stars, and endure hardship. Hiroo Onoda died on January 16, 2014, at age 91, from complications of pneumonia. His life remains one of history's most extraordinary tales of duty, delusion, and endurance, a man who survived not just the jungle, but a war that lived only in his mind.